Hello, my brothers and sisters. I greet all of you in the name of our Heavenly Father, the one true Most High above the heavens and earth, and that is Abba, Father, Yahuwah, the Almighty, who created all things through His eternal Word and His eternal Spirit. I greet all of you in the name also, in the name of His only begotten Son, His eternal life, whom He sent in flesh to come down as a man. The one who is the true King of Israel. The one who taught the very revelation of our Heavenly Father. Who was obedient to the very law or the Torah of His Heavenly Father. You see this, my family. The one who was known as Rabbi Yair, or Rabbi, the true Rabbi above all rabbis. And that is Master Yahushua of Nazareth. The one who gave his life on the tree. His finished work on the tree. He is the one who came to do the Father's works. Do you see this, my family? He is the one who came not to destroy the law or the prophets, but He came, thank you, Master, He came to fulfill it. You see this, my brothers and sisters? And I greet you through their precious set-apart spirit, their precious eternal mind, the Comforter, He who is to guide us into all truth and to remind us of everything that our Master has spoken. I bid all of you greetings. And I hope that the whole family, the whole assembly of the Messiah, those of you in the Anointed Faith, I hope that you all are standing strong, that you all are growing. You see, my family, growing into maturity, growing into a perfect man, having sound doctrine, sound teaching of the faith, which was passed down from our ancestors. You see this? From the prophets as well as the apostles and the faithful men and women who upheld the truth, who loved and upheld the scriptures. I hope that all of you are doing well. And I just encourage you to continue to keep on in the faith, despite the challenges, despite what the enemy is doing. Continue, my family, my brothers and sisters, to be strong in the faith. Do not lose your faith, my brothers and sisters. So, as I'm led to continue our Father and our King's beautiful teaching, which is titled Authorship. And what's so powerful, again, my family, in the first segment, as our Father and our King has been really just teaching us and basically refuting the gainsayers and those who are basically opposers of His word, and to try to say otherwise, that He did not write this as far as the Torah, that He did not pass down and moved upon men, holy men, set apart men, to actually record His warnings and record as far as all of His words, all of His inspiration. You see, my family, our Heavenly Father, through His precious Son and precious set-apart Spirit, is dealing and will chastise those who are in opposition against His word. You see, my brothers and sisters? And so, for those of you, I hope that you were able to learn as far as our Father King's past teaching, and as well as teachings from the previous years. And my brothers and sisters, I just ask that you continue to, let's learn together and go on this beautiful journey. So, as we continue, for those of you who have your scriptures, we learned towards the ending, as far as of that particular segment, we was learning about as far as how not only did our Heavenly Father, who actually wrote with His finger, as far as the law, but He actually commissioned our ancestor Masha to actually write all of the words, even the beautiful song, which in the scholastic world people refer to it as the Song of Moses or the Song of Masha. That song came from our Heavenly Father and was actually given to Masha. He commanded him to write it down and to teach it to all our ancestors, as far as the children of Yisrael, and how that song, those words would not depart out of the mouth of the children. You see, my family. We also learned how you had the priest, who was also charged to actually write, as far as the curses is concerned, pertaining to the law of what would happen in certain, as far as sensitive instances, where you would have a woman who would be, basically, if she was guilty, or even if this suspicion came pertaining to the law pertaining to possibly adultery, or if a woman was an adulteress, she would actually have to confess and come before our Heavenly Father. through the priests, he would actually write the curses. You see this now. We also see how our ancestor Moshe, as well as the ancestors, as far as our elders, who actually had charged the people themselves to actually be custodians of the word and actually write down the words, all of the words. You see, my brothers and sisters, as well as we learned how even a king, which is in the law of Moshe, that a king who was to be chosen by Heavenly Father, who would sit on the throne, how he himself would write a copy of all the words of the law in the presence of the priests, the Levitical priests. You see this? That he would read from it and learn from it night and day, that he may have success, him and his children, after him. That's powerful. So we can see how we have the primary source, Abba, and how he actually, in his wisdom and integrity, rose up his prophets, as well as the elders and his people, for them to actually teach the word and to pass it down, not just orally, as far as the parents teaching the children, speaking, as they would rise up and go down and lay down. They would actually write the words. It was to be in their homes, in their hearts, amongst the people. You see this? So we see also how it was as far as a collective revelation as well, and how there was more than one author, how the words were being passed down, not just orally, but also in written form. So, my family, let us continue. Thank you, my Father, my King, for who you are through your precious Spirit. For those of you who have your scriptures, my family, let's continue. And let's focus on this statement. Let's really focus on this. The fact that what we have to all understand, and those of you who are enemies who will probably be watching, understand this. The law of Moses, or the law of Moshe, was passed down. This is something that cannot be refuted. And our Father King is going to continue to teach us this. Do you see this? Not just through those who were of his people, as we've learned previously, and not just through also those who converted over into the ways of Israel. Do you see this? But also those of the nations who actually were engrafted in. They all bear record who the author of the law is, as well as they mention about, as far as these two questions you see here. As far as the first segment, we were really focusing on who wrote the Torah, and we're going to continue to learn today as our Father King permits, but we also will learn as they lead us, him, his son, through the precious Spirit, as far as who wrote the Gospels. Our Father has not forgotten for the enemy out there who has raised up individuals in the scholastic worlds and even on local levels to try to actually attack the scriptures. Not just what is known as the Tanakh, but even the New Testament as it's known, or the Brit Hadishah. You understand, my family? So let us continue and understand, again, the law of Moses, or Mashah. That law of Moshe was passed down, and there's no refuting that. So now, my family, let's go to our ancestor. Let's go to the book of Yahushua, which we know today as Joshua. Of course, those of you who are in the world as far as modern day Israel, you know regarding the book of Yehoshua. So let's go and turn there, my family. Let's go to, thank you so much, Father, precious Spirit. Let's go to the book of Yehoshua, or Yahushua, chapter 1, and let's really focus on something very interesting. Thank you, my master. And let us commence, my family, again, chapter 1, and let us commence at starting at verse 6. And this is pertaining to the charge by our father given to our ancestor Hosea, who received the name Yahushua. He says, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, to be careful, to do according to all the law which Moshe, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn aside from it to the right or to the left, so that you may be prosperous wherever you go." Thank you, my Father, my King. So let's just focus on what our Heavenly Father, through his precious eternal word, his precious eternal spirit, is actually conveying to our ancestor Hosea, who received that name, Yahushua. So we can see the encouragement coming from above, coming from the Creator, And notice how the Creator himself acknowledges his servant Masha, and as far as the law. You see this, my family? In verse 7, he mentions as far as everything that's in the law, which his servant Masha commanded him. You see this, my family? As well as Israel. Because again, the law that our Father gave, you see this, my family? When he gave his precious law, his holy law, and gave it to Masha, it was not just for Masha alone to obey. It was given to Masha and through him to all the elders and all the people, men, women, and children to adhere to heed and listen to obey and to do all the words. Do you see this? The law of our Heavenly Father was given to a nation. This is what we all have to be able to understand. Thank you, my Father, my King. Now, let's continue at verse 8 as our ancestors being encouraged and advised from the Creator. Look at verse 8, my brothers and sisters. It says here as it reads, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way successful, and then you will be prosperous. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be in dread or be dismayed, for the Master Yahuwah, your Almighty, is with you wherever you go." That's powerful. Notice the encouragement of our Heavenly Father. You see, my brothers and sisters. And so, notice how he did not command our ancestors to be observant or to basically just observe some of the things to the best of his knowledge or to the best of his ability. He didn't tell him that. You see, my family? He told him to be careful to do what? According to all that is written, not some of the things. Do you understand? So even people today throughout the world that our Father King will bring this message to, those who it is led to hear, understand that when you go into the beautiful, wonderful things of the scriptures, there's not to be any playing around with his holy word. You can't pick and choose. You cannot play with his Torah, with his law. You see this, my family? We are to learn from it. You see this? You understand? It is our schoolmaster. We are to learn from it. You understand, my family? Now, does this mean that we are to disrespect his law? You have those out there who will try to disrespect his law, cast it aside. Absolutely not. It is for us to learn. It's written for our learning. You understand, my brothers and sisters? But we have to understand the culture, as our Father King through the precious Spirit teaches us, the culture, the background. We have to understand that the nations that are around, do you understand? There are some things that they uphold, but there are some things that they choose to neglect. There are things that they hate. The nations hate the very counsel of our Heavenly Father. You understand? This is why he's calling those out of the nations. This does not mean that we're to be evil to those who are as far as above us. Absolutely not. But we are to be lights to the world, to the nations. You understand, my brothers and sisters? But understand that we cannot play around with his word as those who before us have done, those before us, and even those among us in this generation who are playing with his word. We cannot do that. You see? But understand how he was, as far as strengthening our ancestor Yahushua, telling him to be observant in all the things that are written. And notice how he himself, the Creator, acknowledged his servant Masha. Thank you, my Father, my King. So notice how it's being passed down. You see this? Now, let's go to our ancestor. Let's go to 1 Samuel. Let's look at something very interesting. Let's go to the book of Shamuel, 1 Samuel, my brothers and sisters. And let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 12, please. And this is dealing with our ancestor as far as what he had to say to the people of Yisrael. Now, starting at verse 1, and it reads, Then Shamuel said to all Yisrael, Behold, I have listened to your voice and all that you said to me, and I have appointed a king over you. So now here is the king walking before you. But I am old and gray, and behold, my sons are with you. And I have walked before you from my youth, even to this day. Here I am. Bear witness against me before the Master Yahuwah and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Or whose donkey have I taken? Or whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes with it? I will restore it to you. And look at verse 4, it says, And they said, You have not extorted us or oppressed us or taken anything from any man's hand. That's powerful. You know, if more leaders out there had this type of integrity, that their intent was not to try to use, as far as take anything from the people, as far as their wealth or their money or anything of that nature, to try not to oppress them, or to be in sectarianism where they were accepting bribes and doing things that were partial. If we would learn from the characteristics of one of our ancestors here, understand how leadership would be so much better. It would closely reflect what Abba has laid down even in the time of the prophets. Do you see this? And for those of you, not to adding to the context, but just learning from the context of the nature of this holy man, Shamuel, our ancestor, if you had many leaders out there who are over nations, if only you would truly heed the counsel of the scriptures, and if you were to truly learn from men of true integrity, perhaps we would see better results throughout the land, as far as governing and making things fair, as far as equality regarding all mankind. You understand? It does not mean we would not have any issues we would have to deal with, but if men would go back and really look at the counsel of how our Heavenly Father did things. Do you see this? We will be able to learn and have better results of what the foolishness is going on now. You understand? But notice how Samuel, in his character, he wasn't trying to use the people to leech off of them. He had integrity. And notice how the people acknowledged and responded his integrity. Do you see this, my brothers and sisters? Now let's continue to learn as our Father King through that precious Spirit continues to teach us. Thank you, Master, for your wisdom. Look at verse 5, my brothers and sisters. And it reads, it says, So he said to them, The Master Yahuwah is witness against you, and his anointed is witness this day, that you have found nothing in my hand. And they said, He is witness. Then Shamuel said to the people, It is the Master Yahuwah who appointed Masha and Aharon, and who brought your fathers up from the land of Egypt. So now take your stand, that I may judge you before the Master Yahuwah concerning all the righteous acts of the Master Yahuwah, which he did for you and your fathers. Thank you, my Master. So notice what Shamuel did. Notice how he's reminding them of the source, the primary source. Notice how he talked about, as far as what our Creator did, our Heavenly Father. Notice how he mentioned Masha by name. See, my brothers and sisters, see, the law of Masha was passed down. Men after the time of, as far as Masha, even this particular time here, our ancestor Hoshea, Yahushua, who was called Yahushua, he's already died and passed on. You see, my brothers and sisters? But understand how the knowledge of Masha, and not just that, the righteous acts. Notice how Shamuel talked about the acts of the Creator, Master Yahuwah, as righteous acts. These things was passed down to future generations. They understood that. If we was to go back in time and be able to look in this particular time and ask people, did you know who the prophet Masha was? Many people would tell you yes, as far as Israel is concerned. You see this, my brothers and sisters? The knowledge of our Heavenly Father, what he did through Masha. Thank you, my Father, my King, the precious Spirit. And notice how Aaron's name, his brother, is also passed down. You understand? The people of Yasharel coming out of Misreading, that was passed down. That was historical knowledge. You understand? Thank you, my Father, my King. So, my brothers and sisters, now let's go as we continue to learn regarding the law of Masha, how it was being passed down. Let's go into the times of, as far as the kings, after what we just read pertaining to our ancestor Shamuel. So let's go to 1 Kings quickly. And let's look at something interesting. Let's go to 1 Kings, my brothers and sisters. And we're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 2. Chapter 2. And this is when our ancestor Dawiyad, he was king. And now he's, as far as his final words to his son, Solomon. So now let's see, which we know is Solomon, King Solomon today. So again, 1 Kings, the 2nd chapter, my brothers and sisters. And let's start at verse 1. And it reads, Then David, or Dawiyad's time to die drew near. So he commanded Solomon, his son, saying, I am going the way of all the earth. So you shall be strong and be a man. And you shall keep the responsibility given by the Master Yahweh your Almighty, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, according to what is written in the law of Masha, that you may be prosperous in all that you do and wherever you turn. That's powerful. Let's stop for a moment. Notice how our ancestor, Dawiyad, of course in the Misreading text we know it as Dawid. But look at what the king now, he's in his old age now. Remember now, these things was passed down. So now he is getting ready to die. He's getting ready to pass on. And notice the knowledge that he's leaving with his son, who is going to be king. Notice how he's not telling him about being faithful and keeping just commandments. Notice how he talks about the judgments. See, it wasn't just, as far as the law of Masha is concerned, we have to understand something. It wasn't just the commandments that was passed down. The statutes were passed down. The judgments were passed down. You see this, my brothers and sisters? This, as far as the Torah, it was given on a national level. As far as the children of Yasharel, they received it as a nation. He did not tell his son, thank you, my Father, my King, your precious Spirit. He did not tell his son, Solomon, only you be obedient to the law of Masha. He didn't say that. It was something for him as the king to be able to pass down to his people. You understand, my brothers and sisters? I want you to really focus on that. Let's look at verse 4 as he's continuing. He says, so that the Master Yahuwah may establish his promise, which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons keep their way to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not have a man cut off from the throne of Yasharel. That's powerful. Notice how, not only, this is so powerful, we need to really listen to this. Not only is the law of Moses or law of Masha being passed down, but the very word, the very promise of Abba. Notice how Dawiyad remembered that in his old age. He's actually quoting what our father said to him as far as the promise, as far as the dynasty of Dawiyad is concerned. You see, my brother and sister. You understand? So we see something oral as well being transmitted. The very words of the Creator, not just what was written, but also the very words that was spoken to Dawiyad. You understand, my family? That was passed down as well. Thank you, my King. So now, let's go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings, my brothers and sisters. Let's go to the 14th chapter. 2 Kings chapter 14. And this is pertaining to our ancestor Amaziah, and as far as his affairs when he was ruling over, as far as Yehuda. So it says here, starting at verse 1, my brothers and sisters. In the 2nd year of Joash, son of Joahaz, king of Yasharel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Yehuda, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoiadin of Jerusalem, or Yerushalayim. And he did what was right in the sight of the master Yahuwah. Yet not like Daoyad his father, he did not according to all that Joash his father had done. Only the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. You see, my brothers and sisters? So we can see how you had the people still, just like in the Song of Masha, just like what Abba had told him. For those of you, you can look at the last segment of our Father King's teaching. But just like in that particular song, what was passed down to our ancestor Masha, which he taught the children of Yasrael, it talked about how the time, Abba was speaking about how in future times, how they were going, the children of Yasrael was going to eventually begin to rebel. This is why the song was given, and this is why it was written down. It was to bear witness against the children of Yasrael. Do you see this? To let them know what would happen. So we see in this instance, we see that there were those of our ancestors who still, there were some things that was right done, but then there were some things that was as far as still lingering there. And notice how they was actually burning incense in the high places. Now let's look at verse 5. Thank you, my Father, my King, for your wisdom, for your precious spirit. Now it says here, now it happened as soon as the kingdom was strong in his hand, that he struck down his servants who had struck down the king, his father. But the sons of those who struck him down, he did not put to death, according to what is written in the book of the law of Masha, which the master Yahuwah commanded, saying, fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor sons be put to death for their fathers, but each shall be put to death for his own sin. That's powerful. So again, notice how our ancestor here, how even though justice was served, there were certain things he had to be subordinate to. The things that was pertaining to what? What was written as far as the book of the law. The law of what? The law of Masha. You see, my brothers and sisters. So understand, as we're learning throughout history, you see this. This is long time after Daoyad. Of course, many of you are familiar with how there was the unified nation. And then all of a sudden, due to sin, the nation was split. That was not Abba's intent. His intent when he first gave his holy law through our ancestor Masha was not to divide the nation of Yasrael. There was no southern kingdom and no northern kingdom on Mount Horeb. You understand, my brothers and sisters? When Abba, through his great hand, when he did the miracles and brought our ancestors out of Mitzrayim, he did not bring as far as, please guide me, Master, with your wisdom to say it correctly. He did not split the children of Yasrael and say, okay, I'm going to open the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds, twice. I'm going to save the northern kingdom first and then the southern kingdom, or vice versa. No, he brought all of his people out. But due to our ancestors, due to sin, the kingdom was divided. You see, my brothers and sisters. But notice how the law of Masha was still in high regard. It was passed down. You see, my brothers and sisters. Thank you, my master. Let's go to Ezra. Go to the book of Ezra, my brothers and sisters. And let's look at something very interesting. Let's go to Ezra, the 7th chapter. And we're going to look at something interesting pertaining to our ancestor Ezra. And this is regarding the journeys pertaining to, as far as from Babylon, going back to Jerusalem. Excuse me. Starting at verse 1, my family. Again, Ezra chapter 7, and commencing at verse 1. It says, now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, there went up Ezra, son of Sariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Ahitub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Merioth, thank you, Master, son of Merioth, son of Zeriah, son of Utzi, son of Buki, son of Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon, the chief priest. This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a scribe skilled in the law of Moshe, which the Master Yahuwah, the Almighty of Yasrael, had given. And the king granted him all he requested, because the hand of the Master Yahuwah, his Almighty, was upon him. That's powerful. So one of the things about our ancestor Ezra is that he was not just any scribe, he was a skilled scribe. In what profession? What was he skilled in? Verse 6 lets us know that. It gives us information. It says the law of Moshe. Do you see this? Which the Master Yahuwah, the Almighty of Yasrael, had given. So our ancestor was a scribe. He was well known. He was well learned in the law of Moshe. Look at verse 7, my family, as it reads, as it continues. It says, and some of the sons of Yasrael and some of the priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants went up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. He came to Jerusalem in the 5th month. Thank you, Master, for your correction. He came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. For on the first of the 1st month he began to go up from Babylon. And on the 1st of the 5th month he came to Jerusalem, because the good hand of his Almighty was upon him. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Master Yahuwah, and to practice it, and to teach his statutes and judgments in Yasrael. That's powerful. So we see how, as far as our ancestor was, as far as he was well astute in the law of Moshe, and notice how he began to what? What did he begin to do? He studied the law. He set his heart upon it to practice and to teach it as well. So we see the preservation of it, even in the times when our ancestors was actually coming from Babylon, going back home. Many of our ancestors were scattered. Again, due to sin, you had many of our ancestors that were scattered. The southern kingdom, as well as the northern kingdom. Do you see, my brothers and sisters? We all know the history, or we should know and continue to learn about when our ancestors, when they were scattered to Assyria, and then you had those who were scattered into Babylon, to Babel. So, again, notice how, in spite of those things, notice how the law of Moshe is still, as far as amongst the people. Thank you, Master. Let's go to our ancestors. Let's go to the book of Daniel, the prophet. Let's go to Daniel. Thank you, Master. I hope all of you are growing and you're learning and having a wonderful time with me, as our Father King, through the precious Spirit, teaches us all so we can learn together. So let's go to, again, we're going to go to the book of the prophet Daniel, and we're going to go to chapter 9, my brothers and sisters. And this is, we're going to just, let's examine our ancestor as far as his prayer, when he was praying for his people, the children of Yasrael. So we're going to go into the time of our ancestor, and let's just focus on his prayer, really learn. Starting at verse 1, my family, it says, in the 1st year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, from the seed of the Medes, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. In the 1st year of his reign, I, Daniel, discerned in the books the number of the years concerning which the word of the Master Yahuwah came to Jeremiah, the prophet, for the fulfillment of the laying waste of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Notice that. Notice how, again, see, what's so powerful is that our ancestors, the holy prophets, in this particular case, our ancestor Daniel, notice how he references Jeremiah by name. See, none of the prophets was arrogant coming up before the people saying that, hey, I'm the one who, the Torah came from me, or I'm the true source. No prophet, not of Master Yahuwah, made that claim. They understood the origins of the law, where it came from. They understood the authors, the custodians of the holy law. They understood these things. These things were passed down. So notice how he recognizes the prophet Jeremiah. Look at verse 3 as he continues. He says, so I gave my face to the Master, Adonai, the Almighty, to seek him by prayer and supplications, with fasting sackcloth and ashes. Notice his humility, how he seeked the face of the Creator. Listen, my family. Verse 4. And I prayed to the Master Yahuwah my Almighty, and confessed, and said, Alas, O Adonai, O Master, the great and awesome Almighty, who keeps his covenant and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments. We have sinned and committed iniquity and acted wickedly and rebelled, even turning aside from your commandments and judgments. That's powerful. Notice his humility. Notice how Daniel, now does this mean that Daniel was a wicked man? No. But notice how Daniel himself, he's not being self-righteous. He's not trying to exclude himself from the nation. Notice how, as he's praying in his humility, notice how he specifies as far as we have done wrong. You see this, my brothers and sisters? Notice that. He didn't say, Master, your people have done wrong and I've done everything right. He didn't say that. You see this, my family? Thank you, Master. So notice his humility. Look at verse 6 as he continues. He says, Moreover, we have not listened to your slaves, the prophets, or your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and all the people of the land. To you, O Adonai, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as it is this day, to the men of Yehuda, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Yisrael, those who are nearby and those who are far away, in all the countries to which you have banished them, because of their unfaithful deeds which they have committed against you. Notice that. See, Daniel was not forgetful of the sins of Israel. He acknowledged that. All of the prophets acknowledged that. You understand? But notice how he acknowledged the righteousness of the Creator. And all the prophets also did that. They were consistent. They acknowledged Abba's faithfulness. See, he's the one, he did nothing wrong. Abba was faithful, and even to this day, he's still faithful in his integrity. A lot of us, in our anger and frustration, those of us in the past, and you have a lot of people out here now who be angry at him and say, well, why are you doing this? And people who may be confused because they may not understand the scriptures. And we say things with our mouths if we're not careful. We can say foolish things. But see, what you all need to understand this day is that the Creator, Abba Yahuwah, you understand, through his eternal word, his eternal spirit, he is righteous. You understand? He has always been faithful. But notice how the people, you understand, Israel, as well as the nations, they're the ones who are at fault. We are the ones who are at fault, my family. But as far as the context, look at, all of us can learn from Daniel's prayer. You see this, my brothers and sisters? So in the context, we see how he is acknowledging as far as the righteousness of our Heavenly Father, but he's also acknowledging as far as the wicked things that the children of Yisrael are guilty of. Thank you, Master. Look at verse 8. He says, O Master Yahuwah, to us belongs open shame, to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you. You see this? Notice what the prophet is saying. Look at verse 9. To Adonai, or the Master, our Almighty, belong compassion and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him. Nor have we listened to the voice of the Master Yahuwah, our Almighty, to walk in his laws, which he put before us through his slaves, the prophets. That's powerful. Notice how he's acknowledging the fact that the children of Yisrael was not obedient, even in his generation. You understand? As far as what was passed down through what? His prophets. You see, it's my family. Thank you so much, Master, my King. Let's continue, brothers and sisters, at verse 10. As he continues in his prayer, he says, Nor have we listened. Thank you, Master. Look at verse 10. Let's focus on verse 10. Nor have we listened. I'm going to read it again. Nor have we listened to the voice of the Master Yahuwah our Almighty, to walk in his laws, which he put before us through his slaves, the prophets. Indeed, all Israel. See that? He didn't say some of Israel. Notice what he's saying. He said, indeed, all Yasrael has trespassed against your law, even turning aside, not listening to your voice. So the curse has been poured out on us, along with the oath which is written in the law of Moshe, the servant of the Almighty, for we have sinned against him. That's powerful. Notice how Daniel acknowledged the curses. He acknowledged those things that was broken in the law of Moshe. He acknowledged Yasrael's sin against the Creator. He acknowledged that. They didn't heed his word, what he gave through his prophets. You see, my brothers and sisters. Thank you so much, my King, my Father, my King. Look at verse 12. He says, this or thus he has established his words, which he had spoken against us and against our judges who judged us, to bring on us great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what was done to Jerusalem or Jerusalem, as it is written in the law of Moshe. All this calamity has come on us, yet we have not entreated the favor of the Master Yahuwah our Almighty, by turning from our iniquity and acting wisely in your truth. Notice the honesty of the prophet. You see, my family. What's so powerful is that you have people who say they're proponents of the scriptures. You see this? Proponents of the Tanakh. And yet, the question is, do you have the same integrity as the prophet? The same acknowledgement as our ancestor, the prophet Daniel. Blessed be he. You see this? Of blessed memory. Notice his honesty. You see this? He wasn't trying to say that he was righteous, or that there was a certain king over here righteous and these over here were sinners. He said all Israel. Now, are you going to come against the inspired words of what the prophet is saying? You see this? Reconsider. But notice how what the prophet is conveying to the Creator. Abba Yahuwah. Listen. Thank you, my master. Let's continue as far as what he's saying here. Look at verse 14. Therefore, the Master Yahuwah has watched over the calamity and brought it on us. For the Master Yahuwah, our Almighty, is righteous with respect to all his deeds which he has done, but we have not listened to his voice. You see, my family? Notice how he's still giving praise and acknowledging the faithfulness, the righteousness of our Heavenly Father. His eternal life, his eternal precious spirit. You see this? He's acknowledging that Israel is wrong, he is right. You see this, my brothers and sisters? Look at verse 15. He says, so now, O Adonai, our Almighty, who have brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a strong hand, and have made a name for yourself, as it is this day, we have sinned. We have acted wickedly. Notice that. He's speaking that in plurality. You see this? He's acknowledging. He's including himself in that prayer. You understand, my brothers and sisters? But notice again how the law of Moshe was passed down. Daniel knew who Moshe was. He knew what our Heavenly Father did. You see, my brothers and sisters? Even in the times of captivity, he understood the curses that was written in the law, that was put on the people due to what? Due to sin and rebellion and not heeding the commandments of our Heavenly Father. Thank you, my master. Let's go to our ancestors. Let's go to Micah, the prophet. Again now, we're still examining and looking at the statement regarding the law of Moshe as far as that it was passed down. And so we see this in history. We see that through the mouths of the prophets. Thank you, my Father, my King. So let's go to Micah, the 6th chapter. Omeyaka. Thank you, Father, my King, precious Spirit. And let's look at, and this is what our Father, his issue with his people. Let's start at verse 1. Again, Micah, Omeyaka chapter 6, starting at verse 1. And it reads, listen, my family. It says here, now listen what it says. Listen now to what the Master Yahuwah is saying. Arise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills listen to your voice. Listen, you mountains, to the case of the Master Yahuwah, and you enduring foundations, of the earth. Because the Master Yahuwah has a case against his people. Even with Yasrael, he will reprove. Notice that. Notice what's coming from the mouth of Abba Yahuwah. His issue, as far as in this time that we're reading, that's his particular time when he's specifying, he has an issue with who? With his people. Listen, my family. Verse 3, he says, my people, what have I done to you? And how have I wearied you? Answer me. Indeed, I brought you up from the land of Egypt and ransomed you from the house of slavery. And I sent before you Masha, Aharon, and Miriam. Thank you, my Father, my King. See his integrity? Notice how, now this is what's so powerful is that, notice how Abba himself bears witness to his servants. Notice how he, in this particular context, he called out, whose name? He called out Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. You see this? Notice how he acknowledged them by name. Notice how he acknowledged what he did when he brought our ancestors out of Egypt. See, this shows that our Heavenly Father was so powerful. It's just like how mankind has memory. Where do we get that characteristic from? How can we remember? Well, our Creator, he's the origin of that. Notice how he has, as far as the ability to remember. In this context, he's remembering what Israel's done as far as the things that they did wrong. He's also acknowledging what he did. And notice how he acknowledged his servants, our ancestors, how he calls them by name. Even though in this context, as far as through the prophet Micah, they're already passed on. They died. You see this? But notice how Abba has them in his mind, how he recollects his servants and brings that knowledge and that as far as that reproving to those of Israel in that particular time frame as far as that generation is concerned. That's powerful. See, mankind doesn't just have the ability to just remember things and mankind is the originator. No. We get those beautiful characteristics from who? Our Heavenly Father, through his precious eternal life and his precious eternal spirit. You see this? So notice that. Notice how that knowledge, our Father is reminding his people. You see this? And notice the recollection of our Heavenly Father. You understand, my brothers and sisters? Let's go to Malachi, or as they say, Malachi. Or Malachi. And let's go to Malachi, the 4th chapter. Of course, in your Tanakh is going to be numbered. It's going to be numbered differently. So let's go to the last portion of Malachi, and let's look at and reflect on what is known as the great day of the Master Yahuwah. Starting at verse 1, it says, "For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every worker of wickedness will be chaff. And the day that is coming will set them aflame, says the Master Yahuwah of hosts," Master Yahuwah Sabaoth, "so that it will leave them neither root nor branch." See, what Abba, this is powerful. See, Abba is going to deal with the wicked. He's going to deal with us. See, a lot of us, we're still not understanding. There's a price to pay for wickedness. Vengeance is his. He's going to deal with each and every one of us. You see, to my brothers and sisters, we need to fear him. He's not to be played with. Listen, verse 2, he says, "But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings." Now you have some translation that says his wings. So listen carefully. He says, "But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. And you will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall." That's powerful. So notice how those who fear his name, notice how he mentions about the Son of Righteousness. This is powerful. This is nothing pagan or nothing like that. This is something futuristic that Abba is, as far as in the context that he's referring to, as far as the Son of Righteousness is concerned. And as far as having healing, as far as in his wings. Now listen, my brothers and sisters. In verse 3, he says, "And you will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day which I am preparing, says the Master Yahuwah of hosts." And this is powerful. Listen what our Father says here. Please, listen, my family, my brothers and sisters. He says, remember the law of Moshe, my servant, even the statutes and judgments which I commanded him in Horeb for all Yisrael. Behold, I am going to send you Eliyahu, the prophet, before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Master Yahuwah. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land, devoting it to destruction. That's powerful. Notice Abba's warning. You see this, my family? Notice how he acknowledged Moshe, his servant, by name. Notice how he says, remember the law of Moshe. You see this? There's a reason why Abba said that. As far as to the generation, he's telling them, remember. You see this, my family? And then notice how he says he's going to send Eliyahu, the prophet. You see that? That's powerful, isn't it? Now, there's different interpretations that people have. But what's so powerful is notice that how he mentions his servants by name. You understand, my brothers and sisters? Notice how he mentions Moshe. And then notice how he mentions Eliyahu. That's powerful. You see this? So, again, notice how the knowledge of the law of Moshe, the knowledge of Moshe, you see this? Even in this context, Eliyahu, the prophet. But there's a revelation behind that. But understand that that knowledge Abba retained. He's giving that to the people. You understand, my family? Thank you, Master. So now, we learned so much so far as who wrote the Torah. Now, we live in days and times where people will come against my rabbi, those of you who are disciples, Talmidi of Master Yahushua. You see this? The Talmid and Talmidah. Those of you who are men and women, brothers and sisters of the faith, we love our Master Yahushua. You see this? There's those who have an issue with him. But let's look at our Master and let's see as far as what he has to say about Moshe and as far as the law is concerned. So, my family, let's go to the New Testament now. Let's go to Matthew, the fifth chapter. Many of you are familiar with this, but we're going to look at it again as our Father King through the precious Spirit just reteach us and reestablish this wonderful foundation. So let's go to Matthew, the 5th chapter. This pertaining to what our Master was speaking. It's known in the scholastic world as the Sermon on the Mount, or the Beatitudes and the Similitudes. And let's look what he says here in Matthew 5 and chapter 17. Look what he says here. Look what he says to the people. He says, do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what our Master said. You see, my family. So understand and just reflect on what our King said. You see, my brothers and sisters. He did not come and say, hey, I'm the one who's, I did this and I did that. You see what I'm saying? Now, again, Master Yahushua, there's people who have different interpretations about him, but Master Yahushua is the eternal life of our Heavenly Father. You see this? See, some people will say, well, when I go into the Tanakh, I don't see Master Yahushua's name. Well, yes, you do. You do see the name was given to our ancestor Hoshea. Moshe named him that. His birth name was not Yahushua. His birth name was Hoshea. But Moshe called him Yahushua. You see, my brothers and sisters. So you do see the name there. Some people may say, well, I don't see him. I can't see him there. Well, there's different interpretations for that. Different arguments, but the fact remains is that the law talks about the eternal life of the Creator. The Tanakh speaks about the life of our Heavenly Father. It speaks of, as far as as far as the resurrection. It speaks of the Spirit of the Father. See, these things are in the Tanakh. You understand? But notice how what our king is doing here. Notice how he's doing what? What is he doing? He's not coming to destroy the law. You see this? He's coming to do what? To fulfill it. And another translation is to complete it. You understand? You understand, my family? But notice how he acknowledges the law and the prophets. You understand, my family? Now, for anybody that sits here and says that our master hated the law or spoke evil of the law, you're a liar. And the truth, I'm here to tell you by my king's permission through the precious Spirit. Any person who says that Master Yahushua of Nazareth spoke evil of the law of his heavenly Father, you're a liar, and the truth is not in you. And you need to repent. You see this? But notice how our master spoke of the law. You understand? You understand, my family? Not just that, but even the prophets. So now, let's go to, as a father king lead, let's go to Matthew, the 8th chapter. Let's look at something. This is powerful. Just flip the page, my family. And let's look at what he says here. Let's look at this. Interesting. This is when Master Yahushua came in contact with one of our ancestors who had a skin condition, was known as a leper. Starting at verse 1. Matthew chapter 8, starting at verse 1, my family. It says, "Now when Yahushua came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And behold, a leper came to him and was bowing down before him and said, 'Master, if you are willing, you can make me clean.' And Yahushua stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I am willing, be cleansed.' And immediately his leprosy was cleansed." You know what's so beautiful about our king as we reflect on him? Is that Master Yahushua, he wasn't acting funny to people. As far as in this particular context, he wasn't like how many of people out there would have been as far as, "Ugh, get away from me." He didn't do that. He didn't say, "Ugh, get." He actually reached out. Look what it says. Let's look at what our king did when this man who was a leper. Look at verse 3. It says, "And Yahushua stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I am willing, be cleansed.' And immediately his leprosy was cleansed." That's powerful. Master Yahushua actually reached out and touched that man. You see this? See, we can see the love of our king. You understand? He wasn't like, "Ugh, get away." He didn't do that, did he? You understand? He didn't do that. And look at verse 4. It says, now let's see what our master says here. "And Yahushua said to him, 'See that you tell no one, but go, show yourself to the priests and present the offering that Moshe commanded as a testimony to them.'" Do you see that? That's powerful. I want you to really focus on that. So for people to say, "Oh, he spoke against the law," he dealt with people's erroneous interpretation of it. You understand? But he didn't tell that individual who was healed from leprosy, he didn't say, "Hey, you don't got to worry about that." Why? Because he knew the intricate details of the law. You see, when someone was a leper, as far as cultural background and cultural insight of things of the law and of Israel, once a person was decreed that they were a leper, they would have to do certain things. They would have to present themselves to be inspected. You understand? By who? By the priests. So notice what our master is telling our ancestor. You understand, my family? Notice how he mentioned Moshe by name and what Moshe commanded. You understand? So look at what our master is doing. He's doing exactly what as far as what he told the people, what we looked at the Sermon of the Mount. He didn't come to destroy the law and the prophets. He came to complete it. You see this? But notice how he's still telling him, "Go back." You see this? And present yourself. And even the offering that was commanded in the law by Moshe. You see this, my brothers and sisters? Now let's go to Matthew. Stay in the book of Matityahu. And let's go to Matthew or Matityahu, let's see here. Let's go to the 11th chapter, my family. And this is dealing with, as far as questions from what Yehukanan talked about. what Master Yahushua said as far as how he spoke of Yehukanan. You see what I'm saying? So let's just continue to read, brothers, and learn. Starting at verse 1, please. It says, now, again, Matthew chapter 11, starting at verse 1, my brothers and sisters. It says, now it happened that when Yahushua had finished giving instructions to his 12 disciples, he departed from there to teach and preach in their cities. Now when John, or Yehukanan, in prison heard of the works, thank you, Master, for your correction. It says, now when Yehukanan in prison heard of the works of Messiah, it has Christ, which means the anointed one. As he heard of the works of the anointed one, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for someone else? See, that's a powerful question. See, in the first century Israel, they were waiting for the Messiah. Now, Yehukanan already, prior to, had already proclaimed that this is the one. But notice how Yehukanan, in this particular context, he's questioning him again. You see this? Listen, let's see what our master says as this message came to him regarding Yehukanan the immersive as far as his inquiry. Verse 4, it says, and Yahushua answered and said to them, go and report to Yehukanan what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, and the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who does not take offense at me. That's powerful. And you know, you have antagonists and people who are haters of Master Yahushua, Lo Mashiach. And what they will basically do is say, well, you know, he did miracles. You know, they'll say little condescending statements. Well, when you go into history, you'll see that even one of the great men of Israel, of course, people in the rabbinic side, they understand one of our ancestors known as Simon or Shimon Hazadik, as far as Simon the righteous, or some will name him as Simon the just. Well, throughout the histories, people will affirm and speak of the many miracles that actually happened under as far as his leadership in the temple. People will talk about the miracles. See, you're not going to play with our Father and our King. You're not going to do it through their precious spirit. You're not going to play. If you can acknowledge those of you who speak against Master Yahushua, and you're known in the rabbinical circle, and if you can sit here and say, well, what about all these miracles in the Tanakh? It doesn't speak about the Mashiach doing miracles. Well, in the histories, it speaks of our ancestors, for example, Shamun, correct? Simon the righteous, who was the high priest in antiquity, and it speaks of what? You recollect what? The reports of miracles that happened in the temple. So will you now negate those miracles or question those miracles? But yet you question my Rabbi Yahi. You understand? See, it can't be one side. It has to be balanced. Are you going to negate the miracles that was done by our Father and our King through Masha? Do you see this? Or the prophets? Eliyahu, Elisha? You understand? Reconsider with your mind. Come out of your dumbness in my master's name, Master Yahushua of Nazareth. But notice as far as what my king said here. Master Yahushua Rabbeinu, our rabbi. You understand? For those who love Master Yahushua, you agree, don't you? You concur. Thank you, my Father, my King. Now, let's look at verse 7. Look at what our master says regarding Yehukanan. Listen, my family. He says, now, it says here, as it reads, now as these men were going away, Yahushua will begin to speak to the crowds about Yehukanan. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? But what did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing? Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in kings' palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet. Yes, I tell you, and one who is more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. That's powerful. So notice my master, his interpretation. You see this? he interpret, as far as we read in Malachi, as far as Eliyahu the prophet. Now, some people might say, well, but it says Eliyahu. It doesn't say Yehukanah. But even in the Tanakh, it speaks of holy men. Correct? It speaks of a person. Think of this. Use your mind and consider. Because some people, in their technicality, can be foolish. What they'll say is that some people will say, well, no, a person can only have one name. Well, one of our ancestors, the King Solomon, Shalomah, even though his name was called Shalomah, correct? Of course, in modern day, people would say Shalomo, Solomon. But yet, Nathan, as far as the prophet, our father regarded him through the prophet. Please guide me, my father, my king. Solomon, even though his name was known as Solomon or Shalomo, however, he was regarded as far as and recognized by the prophet as the name Yedidiah. You see this? Go into your Tanakh and see how our ancestor was named Solomon. Of course, that was his birth name. But he was also regarded through one of the prophets of Abba Yahuwah as Yedidiah. Do you see this? Thank you, my father, my king. So notice my masters, for your learning and for my learning, notice how he interpreted as far as that, what was written. Now, look what he says here in verse 11. Truly, thank you, my father, my king, for your wisdom through your precious spirit. Verse 11, truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has not arisen anyone greater than Yehukanan the Baptist or the immerser. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And from the days of Yehukanan the Baptist or the immerser until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and violent men take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied unto Yehukanan. And if you are willing to accept it, Yehukanan himself is Eliyahu, who was to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Behold my king, my rabbi. Behold his interpretation of the prophets. You can either accept it or reject it, but understand his interpretation of that. Do you see this? You understand? Thank you, my father, my king. So now, let's go to the 12th chapter. Just go to the next chapter. As our master was establishing as far as him being master of the Shabbat or the Sabbath. So now let's look at something interesting. Matthew chapter 12, let's start at verse 1, my family. It says, at that time Yahushua went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples became hungry and began to pick the heads of grain and eat. But when the Pharishees or the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples do what is not lawful to do on a Sabbath. Now, what's very interesting about these particular Prushim was very interesting is this was the time of much traditions. See, you had, and again, there's nothing wrong with tradition as it coincides with what is right to do. But what was so very interesting is that you had many who had certain things set up, and they had certain, as far as religious things set up. And obviously they had a problem with our master as well as his disciples. So notice how to them, they're interpreting that what his disciples are doing and what he is doing, according to their surmising and the way they're thinking, they're seeing that as it being wrong. Now let's watch what our master says. Verse 3, but he said to them, have you not read what David or Dauyah did when he became hungry, he and his companions? How he entered the house of the Almighty, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but nor for those with him, but for the priests alone. Thank you. Let me repeat that again. Thank you, Master. Listen, this is powerful. Listen to our master as he's questioning those who are trying to accuse him. Look what he says. Go back to verse 3. He says, But he said to them, have you not read what Dawiyah did when he became hungry, he and his companions, how he entered the house of the Almighty, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but for the priests alone? Notice that. See, what's so powerful is that, notice how our master, he's holding them accountable for what they have read. Notice how he's questioning them, and as far as what they have read. You see this, my brothers and sisters? This is powerful. See, we're seeing our master. See, again, a lot of people, they forget one of the characteristics of our king is that he is the rabbi. He's expounding. He's giving the true interpretation of the Torah. You see this, the law and the prophets. So notice how he's asking them, have they read? You see, there's people who actually hold up the word. You understand? And just like in Master Yahushua's time, when he was here on the earth during this particular time in the first century, there were those who had that title rabbi. There was many who had, as far as, please guide me, Master, to say it correctly, they were teaching the scriptures, but really weren't really familiar with the things that was read, as far as that was in writing, that was read. And even to this day, you have people who actually are attempting to be teachers. And they're trying to expound on certain things. This goes for all of us. They try to expound. This, we have to be very careful. You should not be even trying, and this is powerful. People will go to the New Testament, but they have no knowledge of the Old Testament. You see this? And vice versa. You have people, they'll go to the Old Testament, and they don't have any knowledge of the New Testament. You understand? You understand, my family? Yet they say that they have the precious Ruach HaKodesh. They have the precious Holy Spirit. This is what people will make as far as their claims. You understand, my family? So they're attempting to teach, but have no knowledge of what was, as far as what was taught, as far as have no knowledge of what was read. This was one of the essential, as far as the problems. Please God, Master. Many who called themselves leaders in first century Israel, many of them, they had their interpretations and their way of thinking, but many of them was not as astute in the scriptures as they were proclaiming to be. So notice how our Master Yahushua was questioning them as far as them reading about the account with our ancestor David or Dawiyah. That's powerful. Thank you, my king. Notice what he says. So look at verse 5. As he continues, he says, or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and are innocent? But I say to you that something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, I desire compassion and not a sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is master of the Sabbath. Notice that. See, they were so quick to condemn, but they had no knowledge, no true knowledge of what was actually written in the scriptures. But yet these men were trying to condemn the Mashiach in his Talmudim. And people have that same spirit today. Many people who are trying to basically condemn the Mashiach, the true Mashiach, our master has a wonderful surprise. You see this? You understand? Many people today are trying to teach the teacher. Master Yahushua, I'm here as my Father, my King, through the precious Spirit, allowed me to be here. Master Yahushua is the only qualified Rabbi Ya'i that can actually break down the scriptures perfectly and accurately. You see this? Now, that's not negating that it was other men who was known as Rabbi Ya'i. But I'm telling you, as I'm led, Master Yahushua is the only qualified one who knows the Torah, the whole, as far as the scriptures, he knows it perfectly. He's the only one. And it will be wise to go to him and to learn of his interpretation. You understand, my brothers and sisters? Thank you, my Father, my King. So, notice how our master asked them questions pertaining to what they have read. And as far as their understanding regarding what it was that they read. Notice that. Thank you, my King. See, Master Yahushua did he quote from For those of you out there that say that the Bible, thank you, Master, for your permission. For those of you out there who say that the Bible is the white man's book, or that the Bible is a plagiarism of as far as Kemet, is Master Yahushua anywhere quoting from the Book of the Dead? Is Master Yahushua quoting from, as far as the 42 Confessions in its entirety, the Book of Ma'at? Is Master Yahushua referring to any of the as far as spiritual stories or anything of that nature pertaining to Kemet in its entirety? Is he doing that? Or is he quoting from what is known as the scriptures? You see, my brothers and sisters. Thank you, my Father, my King, for who you are. Let's turn to the Gospel of Luke. Thank you, Master. Let's go to Luke, the 10th chapter. Our ancestor Luca, as he wrote this to our ancestor Theophilus, who was receiving the account. So let's go to Luke, the 10th chapter, my brothers and sisters, please. And let's just look at some interest. Let's go to verses. We're going to start at verse 25. And this is pertaining to the Good Samaritan. It says here, "And behold, a scholar of the law stood up and was putting him to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?'" Now this is powerful. See, there were many people who, they tested Master Yahushua. They had inquiries. They wanted to see what our master, what he knew about the law. So now, in this particular contest, we have a scholar of the law who's actually putting him to the test, and he's asking the question. So let's see what our master says. Notice his question now. Let's read it again for our learning. Verse 25 again. "And behold, a scholar of the law stood up and was putting him to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?'" Now, we're going to see if our master is going to quote from any other book or any other. We're going to see if he's going to quote from something pagan, or we're going to see. Or we're going to see if our master is going to quote from the scriptures. Thank you, my King. So let's see. Look at verse 26, my family. Thank you, Master. "And he said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?'" Did you all out there hear our master's question? He asked two questions. For those of us who love our King, Master Yahushua of Nazareth, did you hear his questions? That he asked the one who was, as far as the scholar of the law, or the teacher of the law? Look what he says again. Let's read it again, because you have a lot of antagonists, a lot of people out there who are being influenced by dumb demonic spirits who are speaking things and saying that our master is quoting from something else, or, things of that nature. Let's read as our master allows us to be reminded. Notice what he said. Verse 26 again. Let's read it slowly. "And he said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered and said, 'You shall love the Master Yahweh your Almighty with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live.'" Now, what's so powerful? When our master asked those two questions, did this scholar of the law quote to him something from the Book of the Dead, or something from the epic, as far as the story of Gilgamesh? Did he quote from the Amuna Elish, or any ancient creation story? Did he quote from anything, or did he quote from, as far as the scriptures? You see this? So when people try to say things like, "Oh, well, these people were quoting from pagan sources or other ancient Near Eastern texts," you are inaccurate. Because Master Yahushua is responding to this individual who's a scholar of what? The law. And that particular scholar of the law, when our King, my King, those of you who love him, when our King had, as far as asked him, those two questions as far as what is written in the law and how do you read it, that particular individual, our ancestor, it doesn't tell us his name. We just know that he's a scholar of the law. That individual quoted from what? From the scriptures. He didn't quote from no other, as far as any story in ancient Egypt or ancient Sumeria. He didn't quote from any of that, did he? Did he, my family? Thank you, my King, Father, my King, for your precious spirit. Now, let's go to, stay in the book of Luke, my family. Let's go to Luke, the 24th chapter. Luke, the 24th chapter. And let's look at, start at verse, let's see here, Luke 24. And let us start at verse 36. This is when Master Yahushua, after he resurrected, when he appeared to his disciples, his Talmudim. So again, Luke 24, starting at verse 36, my brothers and sisters. Let's read and learn. It says, "Now while they were telling these things, he himself stood in their midst and said to them, 'Peace to you.' But being startled and frightened, they were thinking that they were seeing a spirit. And he said to them, 'Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have.'" So notice how they was doubting. And Master Yahushua let them examine him. Now, look at verse 40. "And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they were," thank you, Master, for the correction, "and while they still were not believing because of their joy and were still marveling, he said to them, 'Have you anything here to eat?' They gave him a piece of a broiled fish, and he took it and ate it before them. Now he said to them, 'These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moshe and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled.'" You see that? Notice what our King is doing. He's not quoting from some other source. You understand, my brothers and sisters? He's quoting from the scriptures, what we know as the scriptures. Verse 45, "Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. And he said to them, 'Thus it is written,'" or this it is written, "'that the Christ, or the Messiah, would suffer and rise again from the dead the third day, and that repentance for forgiveness of sins would be proclaimed in his name to all the nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things. And behold, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you. But you are to stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high.'" See, that's powerful. You see this, my friend? So when Master Yahushua was talking to them, did he say that all things, because see, you have the arguments, and these arguments have been going out, they've been out here for years, and I thought he's going to silence this. But you have people out here who are saying that the Messiah, that there's other ancient African, as far as ancient records of, as far as the someone being raised from the dead having 12 disciples. Well, if that is the case, liars, then when you go into those records, do you see any of these other so-called reflections of the Messiah with their 12 disciples, as you say? Is it anywhere in those ancient documents where that particular individual in those stories are saying that, look at verse 44 for your learning. Is any of them saying these words here? Look at verse 44. It says, "Now he said to them, 'These are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moshe and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled.'" So if Master Yahushua, according to your surmising and your lying tongue, speaking, saying that the New Testament or the account of the Mashiach is something that comes, that are copied from, as far as Horus and all these other stories, did any of them in those particular texts say that they are a fulfillment of what was written in the law of Moses and the prophets? You see this? You see, my beloved family, how these wicked spirits in their stupidity are causing vessels of dishonor to speak forth foolish things. Because there's nowhere in those ancient stories that you have these other, as far as so-called messiahs, that have 12 people around them, and they're talking about that they are a fulfillment of the law of Moses and the prophets. Do you see this? My family. Master Yahushua is the only qualified Mashiach. He is the one who rose from the dead. You understand? Our Heavenly Father rose him from the dead. You understand? Thank you, my Father, my King. So we see that that's concrete, my brothers and sisters. So now, let's go to the Gospel of John, Yehukanan. Let's go to John, the 5th chapter. And let's look at this. And many of you are familiar with it, even those of you who are enemies out there. Now let's go to John, the 5th chapter, Yehukanan, the 5th chapter. Let's look at as far as what our master says here. Let's go to John, the 5th chapter, my family. And let us look at verse 31. And look at what our master says here. He says, if I alone bear witness about myself, my witness is not true. There is another who bears witness about me, and I know that the witness which he gives about me is true. See, what this is powerful. See, our master is saying that there's others that bear witness of him. See, people are trying to attack our master as if he came by himself, solo, saying that I'm the Messiah, and as far as that, he's just making that claim and he never passed that knowledge down to others. No. Look what he says here. Verse 33. He says, you have sent to John, or Yehukanan, and he has borne witness to the truth. But the witness I receive is not from man. But I say these things so that you may be saved. He was the lamp that was burning and shining, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in his light. But the witness I have is greater than the witness of Yehukanan. For the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness about me, that the Father has sent me. That's powerful. See, Master Yahushua, again, for you wicked spirits out there, understand that Master Yahushua was humble. You see this? He wasn't an arrogant man. He was humble. Those who go against him, they're the arrogant ones. And Master Yahushua is going to silence, through the power of his Father, through the precious Spirit, he's going to silence you in due time. You see this? Now, let's continue and learn from what our King is saying here. Thank you, my Master. My Father, my King. And look what he says here. Verse 37. He says, and the Father who sent me, he has borne witness about me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. That's powerful, isn't it? See, our King is telling us something, as he was telling our ancestors who was in his audience during that particular time. See, the Father bore record of him. You see this? Now, look at verse 38. And as he continues, he says, and you do not have his word abiding in you, for you do not believe him whom he sent. You search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. It is these that bear witness about me. And you are unwilling to come to me so that you may have life. I do not receive glory from men, but I know you, that you do not have the love of the Almighty in yourselves. See, notice what he's doing. He's applying as far as the life which is talked about in the scriptures to who he really is. See, they were searching the scriptures looking for life, but see, Master Yahushua was associating that very life which is talked about in the scriptures to him. And when you open up your Tanakh, as it's known by that particular acronym today, of course, back in ancient times, it would be an anachronism. It would be an anachronism. to be actually say that it was called the Tanakh back in ancient times, but we know it as the Tanakh today. You see this? But the scriptures speak of a particular life. You see this, my family? It's there. It's there. The question is, have you taken the time to see it? Have you prayed and asked Father to reveal it to you? But notice what he's saying here in the context. How he's basically dealing with them. And he's letting them know what their problem is. You see this, my family? He's, in the context, he's showing about, as far as he speaks of Yehukanan, who bears witness. He speaks of the Father also, who bears witness of himself. He talks about the scriptures and how he associates. Thank you, Master, for your wisdom. He talks about the scriptures, how they were going into the scriptures to find life, but they had testified of him. And then he's now dealing with their problem. See, they had an issue. They didn't have the love of the Almighty in them. Now, look at verse 43. He says, let's go back and look at verse 41. Look what he says here. Let's focus on this. He says, I do not receive glory from men, but I know you, that you do not have the love of the Almighty in yourselves. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. How can you believe when you receive glory from one another, and you do not seek the glory that is from the only Almighty? That's powerful. Notice how he's exposing their sectarianism. See, just that same wicked spirit is here now, where you have people who, they boost each other's confidence. You see this? But they truly are ignorant as far as, and they don't want the true confidence from above. They rather be recognized by their fellow man, their fellow circle, than the Almighty. Do you see this, my family? See, this was their problem. Look at verse 45. Look what our master says. Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. The one who accuses you is Moses or Masha, in whom you have set your hope. For if you believe Masha, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? And even to this day, people are struggling. When they go and read from the law of Masha, they truly do not believe. Not saying all, but for those who are struggling, they truly do not believe in all the words written by Masha. You see this? And even to this day, people are teaching, but have no knowledge of the writings of Masha. They were not even educated, you understand, in the writings of Masha. See, the writings of Masha are very crucial. You understand? Master Yahushua, again, for our learning, for people who are using that weak argument, saying that as far as that the writers of the New Testament were copying from other sources. Well, our master is basically quoting from what? The scriptures. Do you see this, my brothers and sisters? But we see what our master is saying here. We see in how he bears record of Masha. So when people attack the Messiah, Yahushua of Nazareth, you see this? They're attacking Masha as well. You see this, my family? Thank you, Father, my King. Now, my brothers and sisters, this is powerful. Now, let's look at, we've looked at question number 1 in our Father King's first segment of the teaching. Now we're going to look at some interesting, and here's a question for all of us to really just think about. And the question is, as we see here on the board, we already was looking at who wrote the Torah, correct? Now we're going to look at who wrote the Gospels. You see this, my brothers and sisters? So that's a nice rhetorical question to think about, because you have a lot of people in their, certain groups, and again, this has been going on for years and years and years. You see this? Even in scholarship, years, my family. So you had where people would actually try to attest and say that they have a problem with as far as the autographs, and what they'll say is, well, we don't know who wrote the Gospels. There's no proof of their autographs, correct? But what a lot of people don't understand is that even in the actual scriptures themselves, people would try to use that same argument with the actual Tanakh And this is why you have a lot of people who have eventually abandoned the faith entirely. First, they believed in the New Testament. They believed in both testaments. And then what happened was when the challenge came and they began to veer off and they begin to now basically drop the New Testament but just stick with the Old Testament, when those same arguments came as far as, well, who wrote, where are the original autographs? Can you show us the writings of Masha? His actual writing. You see, when people was challenged with those particular arguments, because they weren't properly trained and didn't know how to defend the New Testament, they actually lacked with that as well. Unfortunately, it's a sad thing. But even with what is known as the Tanakh, and when people say prove that Isaiah wrote Isaiah, or Ezekiel, Yahzekiel, or that he wrote, prove that the prophets, where are their writings? And then people, because they couldn't properly defend it, they end up just doing what? Abandoning everything. You see this? But had they would have known what Afan Hakim taught, and I thank Afan Hakim for this teaching, because hopefully then now we can all be refreshed. If people would have known of how the inspiration, the originator, our Heavenly Father, writing the Torah, and then dictating that to his servant Moses, and then Moses and the elders learning it, and dictating that to the people of Israel. The collective authorship of how the people were also able to write things down. Even the king of Israel had to do what? Write himself a copy of the law in the presence of the priests. The priests themselves had to write the certain curses that were in the law. Masha was, thank you, Master, again, for your remembrance, Masha was commanded to write a song. But that song was already given by our Heavenly Father. He gave that song to Masha, and Masha had to write it and to teach it. And so now we see the written transmission as well as the oral transmission, meaning the oral transmission as far as the song. That song was taught to them. The parents, the mother and fathers, would talk orally, talk about the law when they would rise up and when they would lay down. You see, my family. So now we're going to go on a journey regarding the Gospels. So now, my brothers and sisters, let's really focus on this. So when it says who wrote the Gospels, what we should really be thinking about is this fact that you have the apostles as well. Now, these were not just any apostles. These were apostles that were filled with the precious Holy Spirit. As we would say, Ruach HaKodesh, or in the Greek, you have Hagion Pneuma. You see this, my brothers and sisters? So these were men who were moved by the Holy Spirit, as well as the disciples who wrote, who were also moved by the same precious Holy Spirit. So you actually had people who followed the Messiah who wrote about him. You understand, my brothers and sisters? Now, let's go and let's look at something interesting. Let's for this to be proved. You see, when people try to make attacks, the answers are right here. And there are historical sources too. And there's nothing wrong with going into historical sources, but they have to be used by the precious Spirit as he guides. You see? Because our Father Hakim, through the precious Spirit, is familiar with as far as historical events. You understand, my brothers and sisters? So, but see, you have some people, what they'll do is they don't want to use historical events, or they'll try to basically, they'll say, well, we'll use the scriptures, but, for some reason they'll say, well, we don't want to deal with history. But history is necessary. You see this? And there are good things as well as bad things that are in history. And these things have to be brought so that way we all can have a clear understanding of what happened. You see what I'm saying? So now, let's go to, thank you, Master. Let's go to Luke, the 1st chapter. And let's look at what our ancestor Luca said. It says here, starting at verse 1. Listen, my brothers and sisters. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word handed them down to us. It seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in orderly sequence, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty about the things you have been taught. So now, what's powerful is that our ancestor Luke, he's not saying that just one person wrote about Master Yahushua. He talks about many. You see this? And he talks about how many what? Look at verse 1. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. So he talks about many, not just him by himself. See, if it was him by himself, then now that will hold weight to a lot of arguments regarding Luke. As far as, oh, he made this up. But that's not the case. You understand? Because there were more witnesses. See, Master Yahushua, our Father, through his precious Son, through the precious Spirit, left witnesses. You understand? So now, it wasn't just that. Notice in verse 2, he says, just as those who were from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. So there were eyewitnesses that witnessed it. They were also servants of the word. So Lahuka is letting Theophilus know, just like how it's being passed down to him, it was passed down to Lahuka. You see this, my family? So now, let's go, thank you, Master. Let's go to the Gospel of John, the 20th chapter. John, the 20th chapter. And let's look at the Gospel of Yuchanan, my brothers and sisters. The 20th chapter. And let's go to verse 30. And listen, my family. It reads, and this is talking about the gospel as far as why it's written. It reads, therefore many other signs Yahushua also did in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written, so that you may believe that Yahushua is the Messiah, the Son of the Almighty, and that believing you may have life in his name. See that, my family? So that's powerful. You know, and again, in the scholastic world, people have an issue with, as far as manuscripts. And what they'll do to try to attack or discredit the New Testament is they'll go to certain portions. You see this, my brothers and sisters. And for example, they'll go to, thank you, Master, they'll go to like the shorter ending of Mark and the longer ending of Mark. And what they'll do is try to say, well, see, these things weren't true based on as far as early manuscripts. Not understanding the fact that those verses that people have an issue with and that people will say, oh, they're made up. These same verses were actually quoted by believers. You see this? In the early centuries. Do you see this? So when you have people who are scoffers of the word, you see this? Those who are apostates. And what they would try to do is say, oh, well, see, these verses are made up, but not understanding that they were ancient, the early believers who actually quoted from those very same verses that seem towards people who are unlearned as being problematic. So they'll go there and they'll go to the what is known in the scholastic world as the pericope adulterate regarding a woman who was caught in adultery. So what people would do is say, well, see, that wasn't in the original, not understanding in history. Thank you, Father, my King, that these very same things was known among the early believers. You see this, my family? So we have to be able to have an understanding between manuscript evidence and actually things that were known amongst the assembly. You see this? Because again, in the scriptures, we have variances as well. We have shorter readings and longer readings in the book of Isaiah. We have certain variances in the scriptures. You see this, my family? But from the unlearned, people will say, oh, well, see, those things were fake. They were added. They were, not having, as far as true understanding of transmission. You see this, my brothers and sisters? You see, if with those particular instances, when it comes to, as far as those particular variances in the New Testament, specifically speaking, those things are not, as far as dispute pertaining to if it's true or not, those things are merely disputed pertaining to what? Manuscript evidence. Do you see this, my brothers and sisters? This is one of the reasons why so many people have left the faith. Because when the same argumentation comes to the Tanakh, and when questions are asked as far as where are the true autographs, why are there variances, as far as even from the Misreading text, as well as the Dead Sea Scrolls, where's the proof? Why is all this thing here? Why do we have the ancient stories in the ancient Near East? You see this? Because of that, again, people, they just throw up the towel and they just clock in. But see, those of us who are lovers of the truth, as I found in King Lee, we got to stay on the clock. You understand, my family? You can't start the job and then quit the job. You see this, my family? Thank you, Master. So, again, what we have to be able to understand is who wrote the Gospels. The apostles. You had some apostles who wrote it, as well as disciples of the apostles. You see this? Disciples of the Master as well, that carried on what was written. So now, let's go to, stay in the Gospel of John, my family. Let's go to John, or Yucatan, the 21st chapter. And let's just look at something interesting. We're going to start at verse 24. It says here, thank you, Master, for your wisdom. It says, this is the disciple who is bearing witness to these things and wrote these things. And we know that his witness is true. And there are also many other things which Yahushua did, which if they were written one after the other, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. That's powerful. You see, my brothers and sisters. So even in history, you have Yehukanan bearing record of the gospel. We have Luke. Of course, Lehuka was not one of the 12, but Lehuka was a disciple. You see, it's my family. And we have his, as far as his writings is concerned. And so now, here's the statement that we have to focus on. There is and this is what we got to really pay attention to. Thank you, Master. There is a difference between who wrote the original Gospels and who wrote and copied what we call manuscripts. I want you to pay attention to that. There is a difference between who wrote the original Gospels and who wrote and copied what we call manuscripts. Why is that important? Because for today you have people again who will basically try to come against the Torah. And what they'll say is, where is Moses, the original autographs? And you have some who they'll push it further. They'll say, some of them, they're already aware that the Most High, Abba Yahuwah, wrote with his finger. So you have some people that will say, well, where's the very finger, the writings of the Creator? Where are they? You see, it's my family. But when we learn what happened in the scriptures and how you had our Father writing it and then dictating Masha to write it, and then you have the people who is speaking it to their children, teaching it, and they're also commissioned by Masha and the elders to write all the words. You see this? My family. And then you have the king. When the king that's chosen would sit on his throne, he would to do what? Make a copy of the scriptures, of the law, in front of the priests. You see this, my family? You see this? Even the Mesoretes, they were, according to history, they were what? Custodians of the word. They actually did what? Copied. They standardized the text. Do you see this? So when you have people of the Anointed Faith who actually wrote things down, and you have certain letters that's coming from, as far as from Africa, as well as coming from, you have the Byzantine manuscripts, you have the Alexandrian manuscripts as well. You see, it's my family. So again, what it shows is what? That as far as that it was what? It was passed down. It was copied. You see this? But you have some people who they just get so bogged down that because according to their satisfaction, they're like, well, why is that? You understand? But anyway, brothers and sisters, let's continue as our Father can teach us. So now, understand that statement. Now, here's the second statement. There's a difference between who wrote the original Torah and who wrote and copied what we call manuscripts. You see this? See, the same thing applies with the Tanakh as well as the Brit Hadashah. You see this, my brothers and sisters? So now let's, as a Father King lead, thank you so much, Father King. So now, my family, let's just go on a journey. And let's really just, as a Father King just allows us to just relax and just really think as he continues to teach us. So now, as we look at history, we're going to look at history pertaining to these two questions. A balanced scale, just weights. So, as far as who wrote the Torah, so all of you should know the answer to that. And as our Father King leads you, you can, look at the other previous section, part 1, and as a Father King will educate you. So now, what we're going to look at something interesting. We're going to look at, for those of you on the rabbinic side, many of you are familiar with this work. You see this? Those of you who are Tanakh only, you should be familiar with this work. See, what's so powerful is that you have people today who they'll try to say, oh, well, people are, why do you look at the church fathers or those early elders or early believers? Well, even in what is known as, even to the Tanakh, you had what? Elders. This is, many of you have known, which is called the Perkei Avot, which is known as the ethics of the fathers. So, as our Father King had me to read, and see, those of you who are out there who are, as you call yourself, rabbis, many of you already have this in your library. You know exactly what this is. And so now, let's go and see, as far as how the Torah, what's the origins of it. Thank you, Master. So let's go to the Ethics of the Fathers. Another rendering is called Chapters of the Fathers. And this is actually done by Art Scroll. So, very beautiful book here. So now let's go to chapter 1. And I'm just going to read you a section here. And it says here, all Israel has a share in the world to come, as it is said. And those of you who are familiar with the Hebrew, it has, Kal Yisrael yesh lachem chalek la'olam haba shenema. So now it says here, and it's a quotation from Isaiah, the 60th chapter, verse 21. It says, and your people are all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever, a branch of my plantings, my handiwork in which to take pride. This is a quote that was known in the ancient times from Yeshayahu. You see this, my family? And so let's go to regarding as far as the Torah. It says here, Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua. Joshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. They said 3 things: be deliberate in judgment, develop many disciples, and make a fence for the Torah. That's powerful. So notice how even here, many of, and this is why today people will recognize, even which is known in which is known in the Jewish world, the rabbinic Judaism, in every form of Judaism, if you were to ask an individual who wrote the Torah, they're going to tell you Moshe. And of course here it has Moses received the Torah from, and it has in parentheses, which is an expounding. It's basically a paraphrase. It's not word for word, but it's a paraphrase. Basically it says Moses received the Torah from God who revealed himself at Mount Sinai. But the actual text, it basically says Moshe kibel Torah misine we musara li Yoshua we Yoshua li zekenim uzekenim linviim uneviim mesora le onashe knesset ha gadula. Do you see this, my fam? So what's known is that even those people who go out by the term rabbi, they understand this. If you were to ask them who wrote the Torah, they should tell you Moses. Of course, we know our Heavenly Father is the Most High Author. They should tell you that. If they don't tell you that the Heavenly Father is one who wrote it first, and they skip our Heavenly Father and just say Moses wrote it, that's problematic. They need to clarify that. But according to what is known to as far as the early elders, is that Moses received the Torah from Sinai. He transmitted it to Yahushua, speaking about Joshua the son of Nun. And Joshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. This is what's known in the rabbinic world. This is what is known to those who were as far as astute in the synagogues worldwide. So even in history, there is a history that's been passed down that Moses received it. You understand, my brothers and sisters? And that was passed down from Shimon the righteous, from Simon the righteous, going all the way down to many other ancient men like Antigonus, the leader of Soho, Yosef ben Yoezer, leader of Sedera, or Sereda, and Yosef ben Yochanan, leader of Jerusalem. That was passed down going to Yehoshua ben Parakiah. You understand? So it was passed down from him to Nettai of Arbel, Yehuda ben Tabai, and Shimon ben Shatak, Shemaiah and Avtalon. They received the tradition. You understand, my brothers and sisters? All the way going down to Hillel and to Shemai and to Gamaliel and to his sons. You understand? So throughout the centuries, it was passed down. You understand, my family? See, the problem is when we have certain issues, you have people that will go to what is known as the church fathers. Of course, that's a modern day term. But what they'll do is they will go to what is known as the church fathers. But they have not the integrity to balance those things with what the ancient men said as far as the Zedekim is concerned. As far as the elders. That was as far as that came on into Israel. Even those men who converted over. There's not a proper balance between those in the first, second, third centuries regarding the anointed faith and regarding these men. You understand, my family? But as I find, I keep leave for another time. So now we're going to go into a dictionary of early Christian beliefs. This is by Mr. David Bursall. So now we went here and we've heard as far as what was passed down in the ethics of the fathers. You see, it's my family. And that is also part of the Mishnah. Those of you who are familiar with the Mishnah, you understand about the Pirkei Avos. As far as the chapters of the fathers, you're familiar with that. You see, my family. See, when people go into certain books, one must be careful. You must be guided by the precious set-apart spirit to go into these things. You understand, my family? Because now, if you're not careful, you'll go into uncharted waters. You understand? But when I find my king tie these things together, it's all for our benefit and our edification, so that way we are what? We are sound. Now, so let's go to see what some of the early believers had to say regarding about as far as who wrote the Torah. So let's look at something interesting. Thank you, Master. Let's go to, I'm going to be reading just a couple of quotes, and we're going to find out what our ancestors in these early centuries had to say about Moses. So I'm reading on page 464, actually page 465, just to really look at some things. And let's see what these individuals had to say. And this is one quote here. It says, "By this, you can easily recognize the antiquity of Moses." And they continue. It says, "From all manner of proofs, it is easy to see that the history of Moses is by far more ancient than all secular histories. There is no ancient work that makes known any action of the Greeks or barbarians before the era of the Olympiads. So before that period, there only existed the history of the prophet Moses, which he wrote